everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to have everyone here for Amuse at Home. Today we're going to be talking with Norma Fredrickson of Fibergig and Studio 317. She's located in Berryville, and she's going to be telling us about what we have in store for Amuse at Home. So welcome, Norma. We're so happy to have you.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be with you this afternoon.
Afternoon, yes.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of questions for you. And of course, for people at home, we've known each other for a long time, so you might be in for a treat today. But I want to kind of open it up first to let people know who you are and what you make and what you do. So can you tell people a little bit about what you do as an artist?
Well, I do things with fabrics. Our byline for our business is fresh traditions in fabric. So I make things that are pretty common, but I do them in unique ways. I do lots of different things with fabric, but I typically have made clothing. I make things for home furnishings like pillows or table coverings. I make art for walls, and I also make artful expressions in fabric for churches and faith congregations. And so I make some things that are very tiny and some things that are very, very large.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get started working in fiber? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and what draws you to the medium.
Well, I got started in fiber under duress because they made me learn how to sew as a child. But I will say what draws me to it, what keeps me there, and why I've chosen it as the medium for my work, artwork, is the fact that it's tactile. I love touching things. I love the fact that it's versatile. It can be flat, it can be 3D. You can do so many things to it. And the other part is I love the fact that it's so elemental. Everybody has fabric in their life. Everybody throughout the world. So people know what fabric is. My background is I started sewing as a child, learned to make clothes. I started sewing for other people 51 years ago. So I've done alterations, garments, craft shows, and then I went to a career in home furnishings, which was very good for me in terms of my fourth part of this fabric thing, which is this art studio, because I really learned to deal with listening to people and also designing for specific spaces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, you have to also mention it's great when shipping. Of all the art media,
yes, true.
Ship.
Yes, it's not breakable very much. So
yes, yeah. Well, that's good.
The flip side of that is, where else do you have to consider, is it washable? So making how do you clean it, kind of thing, versus only with the wearable part, but sometimes it frustrates me.
Yeah, well, and I can imagine on wall hangings too, if you want to steam something or, so we originally met through the Shenandoah Arts Council, and I know that, I actually don't know how long you've lived in Berryville, but I know you've been there for a long time and you're very involved in the community. So how do you think your location and your community influences your work?
It's significant. I chose Berryville because it is what I call a rural landscape. I grew up a farm in Illinois, and being able to see the horizon, I love being able to see cows. It makes me happy. It makes me feel like I'm grounded. I also specifically chose living in a small town. I like the pace of small town living, but I wouldn't be happy here if it weren't for Winchester. Certainly the fact it's a university town, the fact there's a major health care facility, there's all kinds of things to do in the arts, and the Arts Council was a part of that, the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. It has the variety that I need to be truly happy and connected. The other part of this is, the other part of my community is a broader, across the nation kind of thing, faith community. So because I do so much work that goes specifically to be used within a faith community, I have really appreciated the fact that I get to make things that are not for one person. And I make things not because they're pretty, but because they communicate. And that's important to me.
Yeah, so I have a few, this wonderful photo actually that you sent over to us. This is you at the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley, right?
Yes, and that was part of their Artscape banner program. This particular piece is called On Point. And I love the fact that the photographer took this photograph in this way. But the fact that the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley has decided to partner with the local arts council and give regional artists the opportunity to show in the museum is phenomenal. And it does build great energy among the artists.
And can you tell people a little bit actually about Artscape for those who don't know?
It's one of a rare situation where there is an outside art gallery in downtown Winchester. So they photograph the artist's work and then have them printed on outdoor banners. So when you walk up and down the downtown mall in Winchester, you're looking at, I think usually it's 35 to 40 pieces of original local art. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's actually very unique to Winchester. And I remember having other cities call us because it's such an innovative and fun program. And I can't help but think probably very timely with COVID right now, where people are enjoying a lot of art outside. I have this, I have this other image. When we were talking about community, can you tell us a little bit about this piece?
Well, this is what was for me a delightful question that came to me last April or May. So I have made garments for people for a long time, but this is the judge's collar with a salute to Clark County. So one of our local lawyers was assigned to a judgeship, and the people in the county asked me to make a collar for her. So this is hand-painted fabric, and I have graying on it and flowers, a little birdie, there's a bear, there's a squirrel. But we were celebrating the Blue Ridge, the agricultural economy, and the beautiful wildlife that makes Clark County what it is.
Kind of want to challenge you now to make like a Ruth Ginsburg collar, since past, but thank you for kind of sharing those and setting those along. Can you share with us a little bit now about your process? Because I think we just saw very different pieces, a wearable piece versus a wall piece. And we can see in your studio behind you that there's all sorts of different works. So can you tell us a little bit about your process and how you make things? And in the meantime, I'm actually going to share another photo that you sent with us, or sent to us, I should say.
As I've evolved my work, I started out really just sewing. So I sent you a photograph of finishing an edge. My background in sewing, and I have sewn a lot of fabric over the years, has made it very easy for me to move into other things because I know how to handle fabric, all kinds of fabric. Many people who do art quilts know only how to use cotton, but I have sewn all kinds of fabric, all kinds of weights in different ways. So I start out sewing, but to that, as the more I worked with different things, the more I couldn't find the fabric I wanted. I would need a large scale print, or I'd need something in different fabrics but the same colorway. So then I learned to dye fabric. I've learned to start painting and printing on fabric. Then I wanted to have different ways to explore pattern and texture, visual texture. This is a photograph of me tying rubber bands around little sticks to create a shapori pattern. And I brought some with me today. When you're ready, we will take the rubber bands off and I can show you what the unveiling of that is like. I like the fact that so much of textile work is a very, very old practice. People have been dyeing fabric through a resist, which is what this is. You cover up part of the fabric so that the dye doesn't get to it. It's centuries old. And it's still good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's what shibori means. I was going to say, for people at home who don't know, it's a resist-based dyeing process. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. And sometimes it's done with stitches. It can be done with larger pieces, but it's just creating, this is the sticks ready on, this is on a silk scarf. And of course, then they're going to create lines. But part of the fun is, this is it getting ready to go. Well, actually, it has been dyed. So that's coming out of the microwave. With the silk dye, you have to have a heat process. And yes, you can do that with a designated microwave, not the one in your kitchen. So that's what's, and this is another dye. This was not silk, so this was done outside. And I leave it in the warm sun to batch out.
And these pieces, you know, you're kind of using all these different patterns, and in the end,
This is what you get. So the green scarf on the far left is those sticks that we saw before there was any dye on them, and that's how you get those stripes. You're never really sure what you're going to get. So when you take off the rubber bands and unfold the fabric, it's like Christmas or a good birthday.
yeah. Well, let's hop over and you can show us a little bit of that process.
Okay, this was banded with these wooden circles, and then I dyed it, and it's been washed, and it's mostly dry. And I have no idea what we're going to see. Well, I have a little idea. So there comes one.
Lots of practice, I'm sure, kind of gives you a better idea of someone who's doing this for the first time. So
that is true, yes.
So when you're going through, so your first process is to create a resist, as it's called. You then dye it, heat it.
This one is a cotton dye, so it didn't need to be heated, but it had to stay for 8 to 12 hours.
I see.
So
but that one needed to be washed. Do they all need to be washed?
Yes, because it removes the excess dye.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Are you ready?
We're ready. Oh, wow. That's amazing. That looks wonderful. Wow. So something like this, would you use this? How would you use this? Is this just an experiment, or would you make this into a fabric you put into one of your quilt-like pieces, or is it a scarf? What would something like that be used for?
Well, this is not a scarf because this is cotton fabric, and it's not what I usually do. But yes, this could easily go into an art piece. It could also become part of the garment. I can see that this could be an interesting yoke on a summer tunic. I also feel that these circles kind of beckon to print inside them. So I could print little flowers in each of those, and then it becomes a bag. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of things. I will tell you the other thing is I might cut it up into small strips. And so think of it, even though I made these wonderful circular shapes, that if I cut it into strips, then I'm talking about the distribution of color to background. So, and in this studio, just about everything gets used eventually.
Yeah, well, that's part of the fun, right? And so actually that leads into the next question. Great, because people, watching at home can already tell that you have this amazing sense of fun, right? We're doing an unveiling today. And you use fun and you use humor and play so often in your work, and not humor in a way where you're making fun of something, or it's like a genuine sense of play and wonder. So can you tell us about how that works with your pieces, and how that comes out in your work? And in the meantime, I'm going to share the screen again.
Okay. Well, here are my most recent playful items. These are dolls that I painted and dressed, and we're calling them Earth Women. And these will be premiering at Amuse at Home. I loved dolls as a child, not to nurture and mother them, but to dress them up. So I've always had a love with expression through fabric in that regard. I've been wanting to do these for 2 or 3 years, and this year I said, now's the time. I will say the other half of this question was not just about a play, but also spontaneity.
Right.
And while you hear a lot of that and you see that in me, I also, the flip side of that is I'm very grounded in repetition and the familiar. I know my techniques really well. I am well practiced and I love repetition, but I love repetition with variety. So here we have 4 dolls. They're all the same size and shape, but I did a variety of techniques. And these clothing is all made from leftover fabric and yarn.
Mm.
So it's easy to be more playful when you got nothing to lose. So I do like that. The other thing I do for playfulness is I have my, yes, are you going to go back to that picture?
Yeah, I can do that. Or I'm not sure if you wanted to show something on the screen. Go ahead.
This is mini me.
Oh.
You can see how much we look alike. I had a prompt for an art prompt several years ago in my local art guild, and they said self-portrait. Well, I was not going to draw a picture of myself. This is how I see myself. And you'll notice that Mini Me has very colorful hair. And she does have a nice smile.
Yeah.
And a terrific button on her outfit. But when I feel like I'm getting closed in with a judgmental attitude, I do a lot of commissioned work. So there is a pressure to be sure you get the work to be what the expectation. You want to fulfill their requirements. And so I can get a bit stressed out by that. So then I just go have a little talk with Mini Me.
Yeah.
And she reminds me that the best work happens when I use what I know in fresh ways. So, playfulness and spontaneity. And she's not the only one. She is a member of our board of directors. Do you want to go to that next picture? So these are more members of our board of directors. And this summer, we had an outdoor art show of miniature artwork in my garden. And the board of directors hosted it and had a good time visiting while they were looking at the art. And yes, I am silly enough to set that up.
I think that's wonderful though, because I think that absolutely is part of your process. I mean, the idea of, okay, I can put these popsicle sticks, or I can put this shape, or I can do this. And so we're going to get into some other photos, but there's a lot of surface technique that happens to your work. And if you weren't experimenting and you weren't trying things, or, you know, maybe being vulnerable in the process of what might come, you wouldn't get these amazing results.
Thank you. That is true. And one of the things that I find an assurance through this process, because I do work in layers, there's always the chance to make an amendment. And if things don't turn out the way, not the way I thought they would, but the way that works for the finished product, then it becomes something else. And I try to always give myself enough time to start over if necessary. But with layers, you usually have a way of finding a graceful correction to work.
Mm-hmm. And so can you tell us what is going on in this image here?
This is a silk scarf, and I'm putting on what looks like about the 3rd layer of paint. Mm-hmm. So this is the 1st layer in that scarf. And this is a different piece. This was painted by, some of those rings are literally, one was like a thing that cooler that goes around a can. So a plastic foam thing was a great print thing. The dot is just a piece of foam. You learn to look at things in different ways. And if there's an example of repetition in my work, this is it. This is just a whole lot of printing black circles. And then eventually I overdyed it. And then I believe it became a wearable garment. So.
Wow. And I think that's another part of what people don't always understand when they think about fiber work is, in your case, not in all cases, but in your case, you're doing multiple processes to a piece before it even goes under the sewing machine. So you're dyeing, you're printing, you're painting. That's probably only just a few of the things.
Well, because I paint in a number of different ways. So yes, that's true. Many times the sewing is the very last thing that happens. Sometimes it's the very first, but not very often anymore.
Yeah. So how does some of this creativity maybe spill into other parts of your life?
I was really glad that you included this question. 3 places they particularly spill into: cooking, gardening, and this is going to surprise you, committee work.
Oh, it does surprise me.
So cooking, I love to cook with what's available. I call it, mind the pantry and the refrigerator. And I do have a significant inventory of fabric in my studio. I do not show that, only to my nearest and dearest. But, yes, and Jaimianne, you have seen it. So, but no, the public does not get to see that. But I love the idea of letting your creativity start with what's there. It also becomes a reason to be mindful about what you are keeping in your inventory. Do you have the things that the basics you need to start things so that you can create something on a whim, or in a surprising fashion because you got inspired. Gardening, I took a new look at this year. I decided to make it my official hobby, since what was once a hobby has become my work. And I love working in the garden. I love the physicality of it. But I also realized I needed a place where I felt safe to make mistakes and to fail. And a garden is a really good place to do that. The weather is always challenging, no matter what the weather is. So it always gives us the opportunity for things to not go the way we planned. I had a number of seeds that did not sprout this year, and I'll never know why, and that's okay. It could be the soil wasn't good, I failed to take good care, or I didn't have the right soil, or they just didn't like it, or maybe they were bad seeds. Who knows? Failure. It didn't work. But I needed to be reminded of that and bring that back to the studio so that I can press on even when I feel discouraged, because not everything works out. The third one is a bit of a surprise, but I've been on more committees, and it's very different doing committee work on Zoom. And I realized how much my work causes me to give things a fresh perspective. Sometimes it's as silly as, in just a minute. So I can take a little piece of abstract art and we can turn it around. That's one of the benefits of creativity spilling into other parts of my life, because a lot of people don't know that you can look at art upside down and go, oh, I think that's right side up. So I'm very grateful for my creative practice because it makes me happier every day.
Yeah. Well, and so the next question is about gratification, and what's the most gratifying part of making your work, and maybe that creativity is it? What do you think?
Let me show you something. This project was one of the most gratifying things I've done in years. And it has to do with the fact that this was all about good listening. What really gratifies me is when there's a connection, when I resonate with the viewer. So this is part of a commission piece. A friend of mine from a church I did work for and that's how he got to know me. And he's a videographer, so they invited me to come down and talk about my work with him. And he made wonderful videographs for me. So we started to talk about our creativity. And he was in a grief group, and he wanted to give people a present. So they had, as a group, discovered a poem about grief, and it talks about weaving and one side not looking so good and the other side looking good. And he said, can you do something based on that poem? So I came up with this idea. So this is artwork that is meant to be seen from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It is woven, something I typically don't do, but I really did like the process. And the little poem is printed, and it can go to either side. And I made 20 of these for him.
Wonderful.
And they were thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
But what satisfies me so much about this is the idea that I did something I would have never done. I used techniques and skills. I had all of this material in my studio. So a whole fresh thing with what was well known, and it served its purpose. So that was just fantastic. Another thing that has been very satisfying to me is this work. This is called Discord. And you saw it early this year when you visited me. And I like this because it was specifically started with the idea as a portrait of Winchester, Virginia. And it has the weaving technique that I developed in the other one. Then I added more and more, and you said, put it on a yellow background. So this is very gratifying to me because I had listened to the history of Winchester, which changed hands many times during the Civil War. I listened to you when you suggested the yellow background, so we had the three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. And then I listened to the work, and it was almost done and something wasn't right. So I added these little knots. I call them disruptors.
Mm-hmm.
And they do add more discord. It's to me, a very unsettling piece.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to share an image of it.
Yeah. And you can see, actually, I think better there than when I'm holding it up, the impact of the silvery gray long stitches, which are moving things out, but those gold bursts, it just adds more of the feel to it. It's a disquieting piece. And I was very pleased it was chosen to be part of an exhibit at the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley that will be opening, I think, October 20th, and it's called Seen and Heard.
Congratulations. I know you were waiting on a reply, so I'm glad that we're probably going to be the first to tell everyone on this interview.
That's right. Well, there we go. Breaking news, people.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
But it's just that whole listening, making the connection, being the conduit of the information. That's what makes me happy.
Yeah, we have this. I just love this photo of you because I think like just even the process of making, look how happy you are. You know, there's something gratifying about being able to make something that someone can enjoy.
I'm going to guess I don't typically look quite that happy when I'm working alone in my studio. And the person who took the photograph is my beloved husband. So that might have something to do with it.
Well, that means you like him a little. Oh, well, that's good. So, well, congratulations again on your news. And that actually leads us to our last question. I mean, you've kind of showed us your practice. You've shown us some really interesting pieces, inspiration, and how that kind of carries over into your entire life. And I think that's what's unique about being an artist is that it's not just you go into in one room and you do things there and it's in a bubble. I mean, it's part of who you are as a person. And so now that we've kind of gotten to know all these things about you, can you tell us or maybe show us a little bit of what you're going to have at Amuse at home?
I would love to. So you've seen one example, the small art. This is actually paint on coffee filters.
Oh,
But I love the idea of small art, and I'm offering these in pairs of 2 or sets of 3 that could easily be part of a work at home desk or situation. They also stand up very nice on a shelf. I like art on bookshelves. So that's it. You've seen the pictures of the dolls, but these are little figures. They are not toys. I like her sitting down in her yoga pose. And this one makes me think a little of you, Jaimianne. What do you think?
I don't know. Maybe I need some blue in my hair. What do you think?
Well, she's got sequins in her hair. I
Oh,
think you could do that.
yeah, they do that these days.
I have little mats that are coasters that have a labyrinth. Certainly the opportunity to trace the labyrinth with your finger to bring some calm today. I also have pillows with that pattern.
Yeah,
I have
that spiral in the labyrinth is always an important figure in your work because of the meditative qualities.
scarves, lots of scarves. Well, plenty of scarves. And I plan to have a few garments ready. This one is being thought about, and a scarf with it. So things to buy for yourself and for gifts. And yes, easy to ship.
Yeah, and I'll have a fun little scarf because I know you made both your top and your scarf today. So.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Norma. Is there anything else you want people at home to know? I mean, we're really hoping to support the arts and get people excited about Amuse at Home. It's such a wonderful event we're doing, we've been doing for a few years in Winchester. So
I have one thing. I had an interesting conversation with the manager of the Franklin Park Arts community in Percival, Virginia. And she said she noted that so many artists seem to have lost their why for making art. And at the same time, I'm very aware how many organizations, I think about churches because I work with them, have found how essential the arts are. The performing arts, the visual arts, we're hungry for them. So in whatever way you can support arts, do it. Now's the time.
thank you so much, Norma. And I completely agree. We're here to support the artists. We're here to support the arts. And maybe some people watching this interview today will be excited and remember their why.
Good. Good.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.